Midwest Environmental Advocates, Jim Swanson, one of our petitioners, and George Meyer of the Wildlife Federation. And I want to start out just by making a couple of comments here, and one of those is that enforcement of the Clean Water Act is not a partisan issue. In fact, when you look back at the letter that we received, that the DNR received in 2011 identifying 75 deficiencies in the enforcement of the Clean Water Act, a good share of those happened under the Doyle administration. However, now we have a new administration, and with the governor appointing the secretary and basically having control over everything, they also have the responsibility to enforce that Clean Water Act. And that, frankly, is not happening. I think about 4 years ago, the Natural Resources went for a tour of Lake Petenwell. And when we got to the water, the fellow, the resort owner who was renting the pontoons to us, complained bitterly about the quality of the water and the fact that he would have people that would make reservations to come to his resort. And when they actually got there and found out how green and stinky the water was, they asked for their money back and canceled their reservations. And Secretary Stepp said, "This is intolerable. We need to fix this. We will fix this." Unfortunately, that is about all the action that ever happened. The DNR, since receiving that letter notification that we were not enforcing the Clean Water Act correctly, has done really very little of significance to address that issue. Over the past few years, and I would say maybe since George Meyer's time, we've gone from a culture of polluter pays to a culture where polluter gets to profit and the people have to pay. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Kim and on go. And we will have time for questions from the media at the end.
Thank you very much, Dave. So I'm Kim Wright, Executive Director of Midwest Environmental Advocates, and I want to just give you a brief background of the Clean Water Act, which many of you know. So the Clean Water Act is federal law that was passed in 1972, and the state of Wisconsin was delegated the legal authority to implement the program, and to do that, we need to follow the minimum standards of the law. That's not been happening. This law has been in effect for 43 years, and as Dave said, the problems in Wisconsin are not just under this administration. They started really at the end of the days of the independent secretary. But the announcement we're here to make today is the Clean Water Act is not working in Wisconsin. The enforcement, the implementation of this act has gone downhill so much that we need to ask the federal government for help. The federal government maintains an oversight role in this important law. So the announcement that we're here to make today is 16 citizens from around Wisconsin are petitioning the Environmental Protection Agency, asking them to come in and help us get the DNR functioning again. And after saying that, it's so important to remind us all that we have many good men and women working in our DNR. For over a decade, our legislature has cut the budgets. At present time, with changes in administrative rulemaking and the current leadership of DNR, not only do good men and women in the DNR not have the resources to do their job, very often they don't have professional autonomy for making science-based decisions about our water. So these folks that are petitioning the government come from all parts of Wisconsin, because it's not just one place where the water is polluted. I mean, there are places all over the state where rural people have very dangerous levels of nitrates in their water. There are permits being issued that don't follow the objective technical standards of the law. In the last 3 to 4 years, Midwest Environmental Advocates has had more litigation than in the history of our organization, challenging permits that are issued, trying to get them issued appropriately. We do that on behalf of citizens. We have to hire engineers. There are maybe 1,000 permits in play a year. Even with the strongest citizens and the best fundraising I can do, we cannot do the job of our DNR. We need the DNR. Without effective government, we can't have clean water. So that's why we're here today, that these 16 water champions of Wisconsin are saying enough is enough. We need our government to function. There are laws that we are not following in this state, and we need to do it. We do need to ask the federal government for help because Midwest Environmental Advocates, every single one of these petitioners, we have tried to work with the DNR to improve this program. And one thing to know is most of the people on this petition have worked for years and years in their communities, going through every channel available to them, and they can't get the job done. And our water is too important. We all have a responsibility to future generations, and we certainly have a responsibility to families today who have a lot of health risks from dirty water. So that's why we're here. That's the announcement that this petition was filed this morning with the US EPA, asking them to come and use their oversight authority to compel the DNR to get busy and fix the program. And a big part of that will be having adequate resources and professional autonomy for the men and women who have the training and experience to run these complicated programs. And we need both of those things. So without further ado here, I would like to introduce Jim Swanson, one of our Wisconsin Water Champions.
Hi, I'm Jim Swanson, and I am a longtime resident of Menominee. I'm very proud to be a plaintiff in this petition because I am sick and tired of the green slime ruining our lakes. I'm sick and tired of the stench making it impossible to sit in my backyard and enjoy a pleasant summer night. I'm sick and tired of having to keep my dog out of the lake when we walk along the lakeshore because algae slime is toxic. I'm sick and tired of having to drive for over an hour to find unpolluted water in order to go canoeing and fishing. I'm also totally appalled that the policymakers in Wisconsin have decided to dump this problem onto our children and grandchildren. My first experience with the green slime occurred shortly after I moved to Menominee in 1987. We had just moved to Dunn County, and my oldest daughter was about to be born. We bought a house on Lower Lake Tainter. I mean, what a better way to start a family and lay down roots in a community, a lakeshore home, a kid, the whole thing. We made the mistake of buying the house in the winter. Everybody knows where this is going, right? The lake was frozen. When the lake thawed, we quickly discovered the green slime. By June, the stench from the algae was so bad we couldn't open the windows, and I could only take my daughters out for canoe rides when the wind was from the west, because the wind would blow the carpet of green slime over to the people who were unfortunate to be on the east side at that time. So we could only, and once the slime was gone, then we could go out and canoe, and it wasn't, going through the carpet of algae. I should also add that canoeing is a really big deal in my family. I made my first Boundary Waters trip in 1977. When my daughters were in high school, we completed an 800-mile canoe trip above the Arctic Circle. So when my daughters were little, it was really important for me to teach them how to canoe. And not being able to just go out on the lake that we had paid to live on and everything, and having to drive over an hour to find clean water was a major problem. In the summer, one of my hobbies is cooking outside over a wood fire with cast iron and Dutch ovens. And I've even built a special cooking area in my backyard for doing this. I can make a 5-course gourmet meal, and you're all invited sometime. But my current house is about a mile that way. So I'm not on the shore, but I live about a mile from the lake. And we like to invite friends over for meals and for campfires. And the problem is even though I'm not on the lake anymore, the smell from the lake is so bad that it's hard to sit outside and enjoy a good meal and a little adult beverage and have a conversation with your friends. It just stinks. A few years ago, I'm sure all of your Menominee residents remember this, But everything from the library to North Menominee, which is the freeway, one year it was horrible. All North Menominee stunk for about 2 weeks. It was just awful. So, and ever since I've lived on this lake, I wanted to help clean up the lake. I figured I owed it to my daughters to make an effort to improve their world. When we discovered when we lived on the lake that our septic system was no longer perking, was actually directly running into the lake, we put in a mound. It was the right thing to do. When the DNR formed the Red Cedar River Basin Committee, I joined up. I actually became a subcommittee chair. And I thought, oh, what a great thing. Here we are. We're going to study the lake. We're going to come up with solutions. We're going to implement them. Well, we got all the studying part done, and the DNR scientists, they did an amazing job. They had all these computer models. It was wonderful. We got to the point where we started saying, this is what we need to do to clean up this lake. All of a sudden, that committee just sort of disappeared. So there were things being done, but it wasn't good. I've also worked on many trout stream habitat projects. So one out here on Gilbert Creek. I've cut down several hundred box elders, make it possible for the DNR to come in with their heavy equipment, resculpt the banks, we put in lunker structures, we stop the erosion. These are very successful programs, but the DNR never gives us enough money to actually do the job. It's never there. And one of the issues we talked about at the Wildlife Federation is raising fees for licenses so the DNR actually has the funds to do the job. That's not being done. The vast majority of people in Dunn County want the lakes cleaned. Our county board did an amazing job of passing a model shoreline zoning ordinance that would have made great progress in cleaning up our lakes. Unfortunately, with our last budget, our dear leaders in Madison voted to attack local government and take away local government's ability to use shoreline zoning as a way to clean up our lakes. The leadership in the DNR and the leadership in government in Madison has ignored or hindered the efforts of local citizens and local government to clean the green slime from our lakes. It is time for this to end. This petition will end Madison's tolerance of our polluted waters. Cleaning the green slime out of the lakes is the right thing to do economically. A recent study showed that having clean lakes in Dunn County will boost the local economy by millions of dollars. Cleaning the green slime out of the lakes is the right thing to do environmentally. Fish and waterfowl and many other creatures will benefit from clean waters. Cleaning the green slime out of the lakes is the right thing to do socially, as many more recreational opportunities will be open to people and we won't have to deal with the stench in the summer. And finally, cleaning the green slime out of the lakes is the right thing to do morally. It is unconscionable to pass this problem on to our grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Thank you.
Now you're getting the long and short of this story. My name is George Meyer, Executive Director of the Wisconsin Wildlife Federation. The Federation is comprised of 195 hunting, fishing, trapping groups in the state, basically made up of sportsmen and women. Jim Swanson's on our board of directors typifies the type of people that we represent. And as he indicated, we spend tens of millions of dollars as sportsmen and women, over close to $100 million of our own money voluntarily in fees and stamps and donations to conservation organizations to improve the resources of the state, primarily, or in many cases, the water resources. In the meantime, we're seeing them degraded because of the lack of the state to comply with the Clean Water Act. I can tell you a little bit about my personal background. I worked for the Department of Natural Resources for 32 years. 30 of those years, I had direct responsibility for implementing the Clean Water Act. I started out as a lawyer for the department, 1972. That was the year the Clean Water Act was passed. I was paid for, my first job was paid by federal funding given to the states to get the act up and running. For the first 10 years, I had major responsibilities to get the regulations in place and to get the first permits issued and to, in fact, ensure those laws were enforced. And to show you the difference between the way the act used to be, the first compliance deadline for municipalities and industries to meet their standards and have the permits issued and meet the standards for the initial standards for Clean Water Act was 1983. Wisconsin was the first state in the country to meet that deadline. Very few other states did. That's where we were in terms of implementing the Clean Water Act. After that, I served as head of the Enforcement Division for the department for 12 years, and one of the responsibilities was enforcing having staff under me enforce the Clean Water Act. And then 8 years as secretary and direct oversight responsibility for all the programs of the department, but clearly the Clean Water Act. But things have really changed. Not everything it happened over time, but it's become much more serious over the last 4 years. And that's what caused the Wisconsin Wildlife Federation to join with several other organizations back about 2010, 2011, to work with EPA and tell them the problems that weren't being taken care of in the state in terms of the Clean Water Act. And EPA sent a detailed letter of 75 deficiencies to the Department of Natural Resources. These need to be corrected. You're not complying with federal law, and it's having pollution consequences. Well, DNR has done some of those things. But I can tell you, and Kim has outlined well, and Midwest Environmental Advocates has outlined well in their 87-page petition, the many things that have not been done and are causing serious problems. Many of them have not even been started to be corrected. This is after 4 to 5 years. I think I'm fairly familiar with what's happening in the state in terms of water pollution issues. When I sat down and read that petition, because Midwest Environmental Advocates has its faults on everything in terms of this, I was amazed. I learned a lot that, in fact, was not being done besides the things that I knew about already. But let me just indicate, I'll put some of the key things that come through that petition. After this letter went back out in 1911, in many cases, the senior leadership of DNR and the governor has failed to adopt regulations that, in fact, control pollution to conform to federal requirements. So, in fact, we don't have the same standards in Wisconsin as they do on a federal level in other areas. There's some statutory problems that were brought to the attention of the Department of Natural Resources. And in that 4-year period of time, there's been 2 legislative sessions. They have not presented to the legislature the legal change, statutory changes that are needed so that the state act does, in fact, conform with the Clean Water Act. A total failure of responsibility. One of the problems that there is that there is a 35% or between 30 and 35% backlog in issuing what are called the discharge permits, which are the permits which take the federal standard and require municipality and industry to meet the standards. There's a backlog. A third of the permits in the state are expired. Now they can still discharge, but they have to just meet their own permit limits. So the new standards that have been in place aren't being brought to bear in the state. There's one permit, and it's for a major facility, that's 20 years since it's been issued. 20 years. Now, there's a staff shortage at DNR, but despite this, since 2011, DNR leadership has not asked for the necessary additional staff to work on that backlog. So they're just creeping along, knocking off just a little bit each year. It's going to be almost a decade before before it's going to be cleared up. The one thing that really galls me in this state, that this state has a strong environmental ethic, and it's because of individual citizens taking effort. The 16 petitioners are doing a key effort, but that is just exemplary of citizens throughout the state that have a strong environmental ethic and stick up for conservation and for protecting the environment. When I read the petition, to see how the department and its leadership, in many cases, has interpreted things to narrow the opportunities for our citizens to protect their water, whether it's their groundwater or the surface water, interpreting as narrowly as they can to sort of box out the citizens from the process. And that's just wrong, and it has to stop. As I indicated, we used to be the top of the nation. We're plummeting towards that bottom. And that is not the Wisconsin I think all of us grew up to know, and it's time that this stops. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll moderate questions from, why don't you guys come up? Any any questions from the media that is here?
How's this going to affect what's happening in, how do you think it's going to affect what's happening in Lake Milman and Lake Tainter? How?
Well, the problem with Lake Tainter and the Milman is obviously we have too much phosphorus in the water, and that's what's causing the algae blooms. And there's really nothing right now going on at the state with like the shoreline zoning thing that the county passed. That was done a great job of keeping soil in place, phosphorus out of the water, and now because that's gone, all the problems that are going on are still going to be going on and getting worse. So just simply giving back local government, local control that they're supposed to have would have done a great deal of improvement on the lake. And the county has been doing things. There's a lot. Fixing our lake is a million little problems. There was the issue with Jarrett Creek. That was taken care of recently. You have the County Conservation Department was experimenting with the tree drops and this whole program of the county around the lakes. All of these things add up, but at every point we need funding from the DNR, we need support from the DNR to do these things, and it just simply isn't there.
I would just add to that there are two distinct parts of the Clean Water Act that are not being implemented in water discharge permits. So one is when a permittee comes in, the downstream impacts of that pollution need to be considered. And we have had loads of litigation in the last couple of years. The DNR is just simply not going through that step of analysis when it issues permits. And then something that's a bit similar is the Clean Water Act requires the analysis of degradation. So we are supposed to have a policy in the state of anti-degradation. Those analyses are not being done. So that means, like the Lower Wisconsin Riverway, there are a number of petitioners there. It's an exceptional resource water. When permits are issued, there is supposed to be a very, very high review that any new discharges can't degrade the quality of that water. Those analyses are not being completed. So not only are we not fixing problems, we're compounding problems by not following the very plain, objective, technical standards in the law.
So this petition is filed. So what happens next?
So we have asked the EPA to act with reasonable speed. They do have a responsibility to respond to us. One of the requests we've made is for the EPA to come in and hold statewide public hearings so that we can really understand the extent of the problem. I mean, through the citizens that I work with around the state, I always get information I wouldn't otherwise know. Like, what is it, like what Jim was talking about, what is it like to live next to Tainter Lake? So just giving people the opportunity, the people who know best, who live and use these waters, the people who are having trouble with their drinking water wells, to come in and understand the extent of the problem. But we've also asked the EPA to, in a very timely manner, hold the DNR to the letter that George mentioned, the 75 points of deficiency. They're way out of date. They haven't been held to a timeline. Hold them to that. And there are other issues in the petition. And if they don't, then we are asking the EPA to take the permitting authority back, that they would issue permits. People in Wisconsin would have to go to Chicago for permits, not here in the state. And we can do a better job. We used to be one of the best in the nation. We still have really good staff, but they are just being kept from doing their jobs.
What do you consider a timeline?
Well, for instance, the rulemaking, the DNR told EPA that the changes in the state administrative rulemaking procedures, that it takes 2 to 3 to 4 years to make rules. Well, there have been emergency rules, 2 emergency rules passed this year to take rights away from citizens to participate. If they want to pass rules to fix the Clean Water Act issues, they can pass those rules. And if they can't, then they don't have the legal authority necessary to run the program.
Another example is the legislature is still in session. The statutory changes that are necessary to deal with making the federal, state law conform with federal law could be introduced within a few months to the legislature. There could be a budget proposal. We're not talking tons of staff, or 5, 6 more staff to work on the discharge permit program. There could be a funding request put into the legislature. It hasn't been put in the last 2 state budgets by DNR and the governor. They could bring that forward. EPA could direct them to at least some, EPA can't direct the legislature, but it can direct DNR to submit those proposals.
And I could almost guess, and because this is usually the excuse you hear most of the time, is there's no funding, there's state budget cuts. I guess how would you address that? Because I can almost guess that would be the first thing I will hear, and you know that as well.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Kim, what's called the WPDS, or the discharge program, is funded through fees for the dischargers. Those fees can be raised to, in fact, cover the cost of issuing the permits. And it's always been a situation where those involved in discharge pay for the program. The fees have been held low, and therefore the staff have been hired to, in fact, issue the permits, and that's why we have this huge backlog.
And I think it's unacceptable to not discharge the responsibilities of the trustees of our state's waters. The DNR has resources, and if they need to move those resources to protect our water, then that's what they need to do. They have a duty. They have a duty under the law. So there are choices being made. And one thing I'll say is that Governor Doyle and Governor Walker told us that if they directly appoint the head of the DNR, we all have more accountability. Well, that is not what I have seen under those 2 administrations. So if that's indeed true, then all of us need to be asking the governor just where that accountability is. And the legislature, as George said, if there was leadership in the DNR that understood their duty and understood the laws that they're supposed to be upholding, one would assume that they would be advocating for the resources they need. But we just can't afford to ruin the water that we need today and that we need for future generations. It's just not an option.
I'll give you an example in this last budget. 93 positions were cut from the Department of Natural Resources. The Secretary of DNR defended those cuts.
Going to a little more global issue and speaking to what's happening this week in our state legislature, with some of the changes that our legislature is trying to put through, particularly in regard to campaign finance reform, isn't that going to make it harder and harder for organizations like yours to make themselves be heard over the kind of flood of campaign money coming in? And what can we do about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one thing that is going on in Wisconsin I'm very proud of is the amend to move, or the move to amend our national constitution to deal with this issue. And there are communities, I think it's up to over 60 communities around the state and counties who have passed resolutions. So I think the people of Wisconsin are on it. But as far as the money, just like you see the dark money in politics, we've seen that in our work. So these permits that are issued, they're very complex, but they're objective technical standards. In the past, when we would review a draft permit, go to the expense of hiring an engineer to make sure that we understood all of the technical details, we could sit down with the permittee and the DNR and we could work out a good permit and settle it. Since the Walker administration has been in, we've settled one case in the first couple of months, which was left over from the previous administration. We have had to go to court on every issue. These permit challenges, which it's a waste of time and money. It's just not necessary, but it's another effort or another indication of this big money. In Kewaunee County, just south of Door County, we have got people who have not been able to drink their water for some as many as 10 years. We challenged a permit that was being issued to a known polluter We won it in the first round. The judge ordered a $40,000 groundwater monitoring program. Well, we are now on our third legal action of industry appeal, where they have spent, I am guessing, well over $1.5 million to avoid a $40,000 reasonable condition on a permit where people are already getting sick from manure in their wells. So, you know, that's what I was saying. That's why we're going to the EPA. No matter how, you know, how many champions we have in the state, and we have plenty, we cannot replace the job of our government. We just can't, and we shouldn't have to. And more, we have citizens that have to hire us just so they can participate, to fight for their legal rights to participate. And under environmental laws, citizens have very many rights, from the federal laws that were passed, because even in times of government largesse, the government can't be everywhere all the time. All of us live in our communities. Our eyes and ears are important, and from the very beginning of the Clean Water Act, citizens were considered to be a very important element of our clean water future. And those basic rights, not even getting to the technical substance of the permits, we're fighting more and more just for people to have a right to receive information and give information on decisions that impact their lives. So that's why we're going to the EPA. We're not taking this lightly at all. It's a big step, but we don't, all of us, citizens, Midwest environmental advocates, all of our partner organizations, we have all worked very hard to try to move things forward in the channels available to us, and they're just not working.
I go back before there was a Clean Water Act. I first started out. The state used to issue orders to municipalities and industries to clean up the waters.